In the previous tutorial, I've shown how to use the route manager and the train spawner to add trains to your level. Now, let's take a look on how to create railroad switches. The train controller asset collection is available on the Unreal Marketplace, links in the description below. Let's start by creating a junction. There are multiple ways to approach this problem using the railroad editor tools. For this demonstration, I've decided to use the create parallel spline operation to duplicate the rails, a bit of manual spline editing to curve them, and the connect target operation to get them in position. Before moving on, let's assess the situation from the top view. Prior to the changes, Route A was a railroad loop, composed of rails A1, A2 and A3. The A2 section was duplicated, creating two junctions, which means we need to create two railroad switches in order for these junctions to be functional. A junction is the connection point between three railroad segments, A, B and C. By convention, track A splits into tracks B and C. When a train arrives from track A, the path between tracks A to B is considered the main route. A to C is the diverging route. The train will follow this path only if the switch is active. If a train arrives from either tracks B or C, it will proceed to A, regardless if the switch is active or not. Let me show you a practical example. I'll start by dropping a switch trigger right on top of the intersection between the three railroad segments. Then, I'll select tracks A, B and C. These parameters are used to identify the train arrival direction. It is also necessary to select the rails that compose the routes on each direction. Starting from the junction, you must select all rails until the next junction, or the end of the railroad. These parameters are used to recalculate the train route dynamically in-game by combining the arrival route and the destination route. With these parameters set, the switch trigger is already functional. It is also possible to signalize the junction by adding a direction indicator to identify the switch activation state. This step is optional, as the switch trigger is all you need for the junction to be fully functional. Since both junctions have rail segments in common, instead of creating the second trigger from scratch, I've duplicated the first one and adjusted the parameters. For this specific case, only track A needed to be changed. Before testing the junctions, let's take a closer look at the parameters. Activation can be manual or automatic. Automatic switches activates when a train enters the trigger, based on the selected switch mode. Manual switches retain their initial activation state and can be activated in-game through the BI activatable interface. For this demonstration, I'll use automatic switch triggers. When the train reaches the trigger, the direction indicator rotates, indicating the switch was activated automatically. The train is then redirected to the diverging route, which means the new rails are working as expected. If the switch was set to manual, when reaching the trigger, the train would simply be redirected based on the initial activation state, which means it would have followed the main route instead. As the train passes by the second trigger, the route is seamlessly recalculated, which means both junctions are working. However, it is important to test all possible outcomes, so let's reverse the train and test the junctions the other way around. Triggers are activated by the first railcar, so trains can move back and forth and still be redirected without issues. For example, this time the automatic activation sent the train into the main route. The transition is so seamless that a passerby player may not even notice the train was redirected to another route. As the train returns through the first trigger, we can verify both junctions are working as expected, regardless of the train direction. Switch triggers affects both AI and player-possessed trains. This makes them really versatile, as they can be used for railroad automation or as a gameplay mechanic. For example, if you have multiple AI trains on an open-world level, redirecting them automatically will make the level feel more dynamic and alive. When a player is driving a train, reversing through an automatic switch, and driving through it again, will redirect the train. This can be used on puzzles or as a route selection mechanic, for example. However, if you wish to have full control over the switch, you can set it to manual, and it will only switch directions if the activate function is called. The BI activatable interface was implemented to facilitate integration with custom or third-party scripts, so you are not limited to the samples included in the asset. You can use your imagination and expand these features to match your project's needs. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. I would also love to know which features you would like to be included in the future updates. The next tutorial is about railroad props. Don't forget to visit the Unreal Marketplace for a closer look on the train controller collection. It has everything you need to add trains to your Unreal Engine project, so what are you waiting for?